So in this video, I want to talk about how to get the 211 BSD image on the PiDP11 on your actual network. So my build here consists, of course, of my PiDP11. I've got a Raspberry Pi that's been configured and built according to the PiDP11 manual. It's plugged into my Ethernet, so I actually have a hardwired connection to it. I am using I can never remember the name of this thing. The Mobia X term to connect to my PiD11. And one of the things we want to talk about here is the connection I'm using here. So let's go ahead and look at the properties on this session. You'll notice the terminal settings are set to VT100. That's going to be a requirement here later on for using the VI editor to modify the configuration files in the Unix build. And backspace sense Control H is unclicked. Those two things are going to be necessary for you to follow along on this. So we've got our terminal session open to the PiDP11. It's currently running the idled LED program. I want to go ahead and boot it into the 211 BSD image, and so I'm going to set the front panel switches to the 0102. And again, that's all switches down, and switch 1 and 6, kind of hard to see here, are up to give me that 0102 octal. I'll go ahead and push the upper rotary switch on the PiDP to cause it to boot into the 211 BSD, and we'll let it boot here. And what's going to happen is by default in this 211 boot or build, there's a network configuration. Let's step back a second here. So we've started to boot up the 211 BSD, and right now it's asking us what device do you want to boot from, and just hit enter here, take that default device, and it'll start to boot up Unix. And what's going to happen here is Unix starts up, it's going to use that default set of network connections to try to communicate on your network, and the odds are really good the values in there aren't going to work for you. And so what we're going to do in this video is discover how to find the values that are correct for your network, and then how to use VI to edit the 3 configuration files that are required. So at this point we're at the system operator prompt. I'm going to hit a Control D here, hold down Control key and hit D to continue the boot. The system will move on booting here. It's starting to add networking stuff. You can see here that it's added a default network gateway of 192.168.1.1. That's completely incorrect on my personal home network. It kind of depends on how you're connected to the internet. My cable modem is a 10.0.0 space. 192.168 is a really common one too. But these files are going to need to be customized, and the files we're talking about are in the PiDP11 manual. And it gets talked about in this section here that there's 3 files that need to be tweaked to match it to your home network. We've got the defaults here from the build. So what we want to do is to, on our network, discover what the proper IP addresses for those things should be. So I'm on a Windows 10 machine here. I'm in a command prompt window, and I can do an ipconfig /all. There's a bunch of ways to do this. Command line is the easiest way for me. If you're on a Mac or a Linux build, the instructions are going to be different for you. But this will dump a whole bunch of information about my home network here. And there's some things here that we're kind of concerned with. And one of them is the IPv4 address of my Windows PC, which is what this line right here is. The default gateway, the version 4 IP here is 10.0.0.1. That's also going to be the IP address of my cable modem in this case, which is important. DHCP doesn't come into use here, so we don't want to worry about that. The other thing we need to know are the DNS servers that are being talked to, and in this case my ISP is providing me those 2 addresses for DNS lookup. DNS lookup is what takes, if you go to www.google.com, it goes out to a DNS server, it takes that text for that URL, and it says what's the actual IP address on the internet that goes to, and it converts it to the IP address. So DNS is important here. If you want your 211 BSD to be able to, say, do a ping to google.com like it shows in the manual, you need the correct DNS entries. We can see here that his DNS entries for the 211 BSD were his cable router, his cable modem, or whatever his his network connection device was at home, and the name servers that were provided on it. So we're going to need to change these two here, these two guys here, to the values for me of these two. I'm going to need to change entries in here, really converting the 192.168.1 to 10.0.0 to match my home network. We're going to want to assign a IP address to my the 211 BSD, the PDP11. That's done here. So that for me is going to become 10.0.0 dot and then a IP that I'll pick that'll be a static IP, meaning that that IP is not being assigned by a network device. It's just it's hard coded on the device. We're going to also want to look at in this third file. There's a net mask, and odds are really good. Yours is going to be identical. Subnet mask here is net mask here, did the same thing, and in this case it matches. For me, this is a real typical setting. The broadcast here, for me, is we're going to take the 10.0.0 and we're going to replace the 192.198 or 192.168.1 with 10.0.0 and leave the 255 alone. And then the default here is again my cable router or modem, and that's going to get changed to the 10.0.0.1 down here. So what I've done in the build document is I've copied these lines out and I've gone through and planned the changes I want to make. So I'm going to use vi in the image to actually edit, in this case, this host file. I'm going to change this entry to change this to 10.0.0. I'm going to change this entry to change it to 10.0.0.200, and I'm just picking 200 as the static IP of my PDP11 on my home network. In my configuration, I'm calling addresses 200 and above static. Other people do different things. This needs to be an IP that no other device on your network is using, and we can talk a little bit about that here. So back at the command prompt, I can do a ping 10.0.0.200, and nothing should reply. So there's nothing listening out there on an IP address for ping, and that's because currently my PiDP11 is listening on this address, which is invalid in my network. And there's no other devices here. There's nothing on my network listening on that IP address. A typical cable modem, you can go into the administrator screen on it and look at IP addresses that are assigned to all your home network devices. I'm not going to do that here. But research a cable modem. You can figure that out if you need to. But like I said, so I've moved ahead and built the changes I need for my network. We're going to edit this guy. We're going to edit this guy. We're going to leave the localhost alone. 127.0.0.1 is a typical localhost. I will probably change the domain name here. I use STB.com at home. Name server, I'm going to change to 10.0.0.1, and remember that name server is one of the DNS entries. In this case, my cable modem, which is on this IP address, manages what's called DHCP. DHCP is a device can say, I need an IP address. It'll give it one. And assign it a name. And this way, if I'm trying to get to a device on my local network that's named, I can actually connect to it by the name and not the hard-coded IP. It'll then go out to these two different name servers and say, can you look this name up for me and give me an IP address? Remember, this came from down here. In these commands, I've also added a cat command. That cat will type this file to the screen so you can just validate your edits took. So you'll see I've created 3 cat commands in advance as well. If I'm only going to edit the netstat file, I'm going to leave the host name of my PDP11. The net mask doesn't need to change, but we'll need to change the broadcast and the default here. And then I'll type that file back to the screen so I can see it. So we're sitting here, BSD Unix has come up. What you see when the system starts through this is it pauses for long periods of time, And that's because it can't talk out on the network. It's trying to talk to things on the network and it can't because it's just not mapped correctly into my home network. It finally comes up here and running. I can hit enter to get a login prompt. I've assigned a password to the root account here. I think by default it's empty. I assigned a password using the passwd command so to make my PDP11 a little more secure. So let's get logged in. And we're logged into the root console. We can do an ls to see the folders at root. We can do a pwd, which prints our working directory. So if you're not familiar with Unix, you need to kind of look some of these commands up and become familiar with them. But what I want to do first here is edit this file. And how I'm going to do that is I'm just going to copy this command out of the Word document. And I'm going to hit Shift Insert here on my PC to just paste that in, save me from typing it. And this will bring up the Vi editor. So there's a couple things here to know about Vi. Vi requires a VT100 or compatible terminal. Vi assumes, and this is correct for a VT100, that it's 80 columns by, I believe, 25 lines. So that's why all this real estate down here in my terminal session is not being used. Vi is really locked into 80 columns by 25 lines here. The tildes here just indicate there's blank lines. There's no content there. So in Vi by default, everything's mapped correctly. You can use the cursor keys on your keyboard to move the cursor around. The second thing to know about Vi is to send a command to Vi itself. Typically you hit the escape key and then a colon. And what you should have saw down here is the colon appeared. And I can give Vi commands here like W to write the file out, Q, enter to quit, or Q bang, and remember this one, Q bang to say, throw the edits away, I've screwed the file up, I want to start over. So I'm just going to throw the edits that we started here away, and really nothing was changed. So play a little bit with Vi and get used to hitting escape colon to give it a command. In this case I hit on escape colon and then just hit enter because I didn't actually want to send a command. You can move the cursor around by default here, but once you issue like an insert command to insert text, the cursor keys will no longer work. It'll actually just send garbage into the edit file. So if I'm going to insert text here, I'm going to hit the I key to issue the insert command. Then I can start typing text, and we'll do this here. I'll hit I, and I'll just start typing stuff in, and you can see it's inserting. The problem here now is if I hit one of the cursor keys, you'll see this garbage start to appear. This ABC stuff is coming from the cursor keys, and it's actually embedded that text in my file. I've screwed up. So I'm going to hit escape, and then the colon, and notice I get the colon prompt down here, and I'm going to do a just quit. Throw the changes away, Q exclamation point, and start over. So let's try to edit it again. So we've got the file back pristine. So we know that for router, homeland, that entry, right here, I want to change that to be 10001. So what I'm going to do here is hit the X key. The X will delete the character under the cursor. So X, 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 X. We've deleted those characters. Now I'm going to hit the I key to put Vi in insert mode. I'm going to type in 10.0.0, and we've got that entry done. Now you'd be tempted right here to hit the cursor key to go down, but remember we're in insert mode. We hit I to get Vi into the insert mode. If I hit a cursor key now, it'll start putting those random A's and B's in. I need to hit escape here now to get control back from Vi. There was no indication here on the screen that anything happened, but by pressing the escape, I can now use the cursor keys to move around. We now want to go to the second line, and I want to change it to be 10.0.0.200. So we've hit escape. We're back in control mode. I can hit X now to start deleting these characters out. They're gone. I can hit I to start inserting characters, and you see the weird dance because the tab in the file where the cursor moves around weird. But when I hit I, the cursor did come back to the beginning of the line. I'm going to type in 10.0.0.200. And I'm happy with that. It looks like I've made the edits correctly. They match what I had planned for here. That's a good thing. So I'm going to hit escape again, colon, and W to write the file. Then I'll hit enter, and it tells us it wrote out 3 lines. And then I'm going to hit escape, colon, and Q to just quit. Now I'm going to grab the cat statement here. I'm just going to copy it from the Word document and do a shift insert to paste it into the terminal session. And we can see there's the file we ended up with, and it's just exactly like I expected it to look. So now we can move on to the second file. And I'm going to copy out the vi command again just because it's easiest. Oops. I copied more than one line is what that is. So let me just copy that one line, shift insert. And we're now editing that second file. We can see it here. And we know that we want to change our home LAN name here. So I'm going to move, using the cursor keys, I'm going to move the cursor out. I'm going to hit X to delete these off. I'm going to hit I to begin inserting text. And STB.com for Shadowtron blog is my home domain. Now remember, I hit I, I'm in insert mode. I need to hit escape again to get out of insert mode so I can move the cursor keys around. We know this entry is wrong, so I'm going to hit X to delete this off of here. I'm going to hit I to insert. I'm going to type in 10.0.0.1, and that's what I want. Again, I'm in insert mode, hit escape, get control back. And now I need to completely delete these 8s out. So I'm going to use X to delete these off. I'm going to hit I to insert, and it's 75.75. Oops. I had to hit the backspace key there. When I showed you the mapping in here, this is important in the edit session. When we look at the terminal settings, if you have this checked, backspace doesn't work correctly. So by unchecking this, backspace should work correctly, and this should be a good edit. 75 again, .75, hit escape again to get back control. Move down to the third entry, move to where I want to start removing characters, and hit X, 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 X. I to insert, 75.75.75. And I think the other one we determined was 76. 76. I'm going to hit escape, colon, W to write the file out, escape, colon, quit. And I'm going to type the file to absolutely make sure, in this case cat will type the file to the device you're editing on. And again, I'm getting into that where it's going to white axe up like that. I'm going to copy that string out and just paste it in here. And we can see the edits took. So where I had to use backspace here, it didn't leave garbage in the file. If you had your backspace, that checkbox not unchecked, you would have had garbage here in the file. So we're through 2 of the 3 files. Now this file's a little bit more complex to edit, and we'll explain this here when we get into vi. So we're sitting in vi, and remember when I first started talking to you about vi, the VT100 is 80 columns by I believe 25 lines. And if we look for the entries we want, we don't see them here in the file. We have to actually use the cursor keys and scroll down. And when we get to the bottom of the little window here, you'll see the text start to shift up. And that's again because vi is believing you're on a VT100 with that screen resolution. So all this other screen we have out here just doesn't matter in vi. It's really locked into this 80 row by 25 line. So there's really the lines we want to edit. I'm going to leave my host name as PDP11. The broadcast or the net mask stays the same. We're going to edit the broadcast to be 10.00.255. Control back in here. I'm going to move the cursor over to here, and I'm going to hit X, 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 X. Insert 10.0.0. Escape to get out of insert mode. Now I can move the cursor around again. And the default is the IP address of my cable modem, so 10.0.0.1. So really here we're going to do up here, sorry. We're going to again hit X's to delete everything out that we don't want. We're going to hit I to insert 10.0.0.1. Going to hit escape again to get control back. Colon, the W command to write it out, and it's written. Then I'm going to hit escape, colon, and Q to quit. And then I want to just look at that file and make sure that what I intended to edit actually edited. And we can see right here, so that looks correct to me. 10.0.0.255, 10.0.0.1. The machine name's the PDP11. And localhost, I just leave it alone. 127.0.0.1 is typical. So it looks to me like, at this point, I've got these files edited correctly. We can do a ping here of Google. This ping should fail. It should even be able to look up the name. So this might take a minute to time out. It can't look up google.com. I mean, we're off the network at this point. This just isn't going to work. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control-C to cancel out of the ping. So now I want to restart the 211 BSD image. Type sync 3 times in a row. This gets the system to a point here where you could shut it down. In this case, I'm just going to go over to the PiDP11. I'm going to push the upper rotary switch to tell simh to go ahead and reboot the machine. And that was a safe reboot. The sync got all of the disk buffers flushed, and it should have got the entire disk subsystem, everything back in a clean state so the machine could be booted. We're now back to where do you want to boot from. I'm going to hit enter to take the default. It'll start to wake Unix up here. If you've got everything correctly, this login should actually run quicker than the first time you did it because it's going to be able to find things on the network. So the 211 BSD is waking up. We're now at the operator prompt. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control-D to finish bringing the system up multi-user. You can see right here that it took the one change I made for the gateway, and you can see this is moving really quickly through, and we're already at the login prompt, so those several minutes of wait I had before are gone, and I'm pretty confident we're on the network. This enable to get host name for machine printer needs to be dealt with in a different way, and we're not going to address that in this video. But if I go in here now and do root and my password, we're now in, and now I should be able to do a ping google.com. And bing, it was able to look up the google.com IP address, so the DNS lookup is working. Ping traffic is going out from the PDP11 over the wired connection on the Raspberry Pi. Things are working here. We're actually on the network. That's really cool. The next thing I want to talk about is this image right here. And I just may have an old connection here. Yeah. Oh, I didn't mean to kill that. Well, I'll go ahead and close all the sessions. I'm being kind of stupid, but let's get back into the session where we were connected. So something I didn't note here that I probably should have is the 10.0.0.144 is the wired address, I believe, of my Raspberry Pi. It might be the wireless address, but it's the Raspberry Pi's address. I then gone in and created a Telnet session, which is this guy right here. So we're telling it to Telnet, we're telling it to use the IP address of the PDP11 itself. Telnet is port 23. Again, to be VT100, the backspace is unchecked. And so this gives me a Telnet definition to be able to connect to directly to the IP address of the PDP11. And if I double click it, we get boom. There's a login. I'll come in as root again because I don't have any other accounts at the moment. And I'm logged in here and I have a session going and life is wonderful. And if we go back to the operator login, you see right here that it's telling us that there was a login from root on the TTYP0 device, and it came from, and believe it or not, that is the name of my computer here on the network. And really, what becomes its FQDN essentially, its fully qualified name out of the Comcast world. But in the operator console, I just saw somebody do a login, and that was this session over here, and we're actually logged in. I hope this was somewhat useful. There's a whole lot of pieces here to keep in mind. Look at your ipconfig/all command, because you can pull the pieces you need to know out of here. Keep in mind that name servers in here are DNS servers here in the ipconfig dump. Same thing, just slightly different name. The default gateway, the v4 IP, is typically your cable router. We use that here as a name server. And we also used it here as the home router. This is, actually my cable modem's IP. We created an entry in 211BSD to give this machine an IP address of 10.0.0.200. That's the IP address of my PDP11. We pulled out, I think we just hit this, the DNS IP addresses, the DNS server names. These are the ones that my ISP gives me through my cable modem. We added those to the PDP11 so it could find those things. Subnet mask didn't change. We changed the broadcast to be 10.0.0 for us. Made the changes, booted the machine, and boom, we're in. So it's really pretty sweet. Let's go ahead and create an xterm session. So let's create a new session. Actually, an SSH session, I mean. Let's go to 10.0.0.200 again. We're going to leave the terminal settings as xterm. I believe we need to uncheck this in xterm as well. Bookmark settings, I'm going to call this SSH because it's an SSH session. No, not SSH. It's an xterm session. So that should add over here an xterm definition. Oh, that's actually not going to connect. See if we can make this connect. That's not. That should have connected. No, it shouldn't have. I take that back. That shouldn't have connected. The PDP11 is providing Telnet. Telnet notices on port 23. It's listening on port 23 for incoming Telnet requests. SSH is a much later generation. On port 22, it's a secure socket or secure shell connection. It's much later, and I don't think by default the 211BSD even supports SSH. Although I'm sure somebody has written one for it, so actually makes sense that didn't work. Anything else to cover here? I don't think so. So you can notice here that even though the definition is VT100, my auto scroll's too quick, and the machine gets out of sync with it. You can see here in this case, even though it thinks I'm in a VT100 session, the VT100 session really only lives down here at the moment. This is just the terminal software scrolling things up higher. So, there it is. I don't think there's much more for me to say here. Hopefully this makes sense. I wonder what's in README. Oh, it's capital. Oh, shoot, cat. Another little thing to keep in mind, Unix is case sensitive. The README file here is case sensitive. Lowercase README doesn't match file name. Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. And again, we're only able to scroll up through this because of the implementation of the terminal software here. Interesting. There's all kinds of good stuff to explore here. Yep. LS to get a directory. Anyhow, I think I will wrap this video up here. Hopefully this will help somebody, and we'll talk soon.